Assalamu alaikum. We'd like to welcome everyone today that's joining us to our Masjid New Africa Center for Human Development Sunday Talim and Public Address. And today we have none other than our resident Imam Tyerre Amin Boyd. Now, Imam Tyerre is very humble and modest. So I'm going to keep it real brief because I don't want to I don't want to put too much pressure, and I don't want to. I just want to just basically welcome you to the brother. He's a personal friend. He's a student of the religion. He's a believer. He's a friend of the people. He's an extremely hard worker in the community. He's a devoted husband and father. He's just a hard worker. When I think about that, he's just a hard worker and a friend of the people and a believer. So I'd like to welcome and not necessarily introduce you because we all know Brother Imam Tyerre, but just like to welcome you to our presentation today. And our topic is ongoing. It's Your Community is a Garden, Connecting Your Faith to Reality.
Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you. We begin with God's name, the merciful benefactor, the merciful redeemer. Say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Let us open with a short dua or a short informal prayer, we say, from the Quran. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين Amin. That is to say, we seek refuge and protection with God, Allah, from Satan, the rejected enemy, and we begin with God's name, the merciful benefactor, the merciful redeemer. All praises belong to God, Allah, guardian, evolver, cherisher, sustainer of all the systems of knowledge, the merciful benefactor, the merciful redeemer, master of the day of judgment. Him alone do we worship, and him alone do we ask for help. Show us the straight way, the way of those on whom you have bestowed your grace, those whose portion is not wrath, and those who go not astray. Amin. Again, thank you for those of you who are joining us for our live Sunday public address, or ta'aleem, as it is known to others. And we thank Sister Latifa, who is our wonderful host, who orchestrates our programming and our live stream. We thank Allah for her. And for those of you who have been committed to supporting us here at Masjid New Africa Center for Human Development, all praises be to Allah, Almighty God, the creator of the heavens and the earth and everything in between. So our topic, as always, is your community is a garden. Your community is a garden. And our subtopic is connecting our faith to reality. Your community is a garden and connecting our faith to reality. I want to begin by emphasizing why the significance of this garden, or why this parable of the community being compared to a garden is so important, and it's so universal to our purpose as human beings. For one, the garden is representative of a community, and a garden can consist of many different things that are not only planted, but grown, developed, and cultivated in one specific area. But it may involve a wide arrangement of different produce in this garden. Nevertheless, a community is the same way. Whether we come from specific neighborhoods, uh, counties, cities, etc. It consists of different people with different cultural norms, cultural backgrounds, yet and still we're all a people living together in a specific location. And there's some basic needs that there's no community of people that exists without a having to have their basic necessities met. And among those basic necessities that are met, that we highlight more than other in most times, is we highlight the fact that every human being, or all communities of human beings, are deserving of safety and protection. The safety and well-being of ourselves and our families is the utmost priority. It doesn't matter what language we speak, what color we are. We all identify with the fact that as human beings, we deserve to be safe. Um, and we also deserve to be free. And when I say free, I'm not saying free in the context of being physically in bondage. I'm saying free in the sense of our intelligence being respected, our intellect being respected, and us being afforded the space for our freedom for our intellectual freedom to thrive, to thrive and to be considered important. So thus the value of our self-value becomes a thing that is respected and acknowledged, not just by us as individuals, but by one another. Very important. So last week, unfortunately, we wasn't able to be with you all um, for reasons, of course. Juneteenth weekend was last week, and Father's Day also fell on that Sunday. Um, so we decided to take the day off and spend that day with our families, and for two reasons. Here in Galveston, Texas, the birthplace of Juneteenth. Of course, we had the huge celebration in the parade, in which my wife is one of the committee members, and I was fortunate to be able to help support and organize the parade along with her and the staff that she's a part of, the amazing staff. And in Galveston, if you didn't know this, I'm going to share this with you now. Juneteenth in Galveston is known officially as Jamal Shabazz Day. So Jamal Shabazz is not only a pioneer, a historical pioneer figure, father, friend, coach. He was also who I consider to be my companion. He was a companion, a trusted companion, a personal companion of mine. We did a lot of work together. But I met him just as most of the youth did on Galveston Island in the early 80s, being my coach. So Juneteenth was something that he took a lot of pride in. And up until the day he returned to Allah, he worked tirelessly to make sure that the Juneteenth tradition was upheld and it lived on in Galveston. And one of his hopes was that it would give us a sense of pride and respect for the experience that we have had in Galveston as it regards to the freeing of the enslaved people that was in this particular area, which actually came 2 years after Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. So we were celebrating Jamal Shabazz Day along with Juneteenth here in Galveston, Texas, at Wright CUNY Park. Had a huge parade, fed over 250 people. It was just an amazing event that we all got to come together and just, to reflect and to share and to have fun with one another. And then Father's Day was that Sunday. So we wasn't with you all streaming because just as we did on Mother's Day, we wanted to allow our fathers to have the opportunity that they very rarely get. Fathers don't get as much recognition as the mothers. Um, and me, this is up for debate. It's debatable, but we know, we wanted the men and the fathers to have that moment of recognition uninterrupted. So we didn't stream last week, but now we're here with back. And there was so much I wanted to share last week with you all, but of course we didn't stream. Um, but while I was away, you had a guest speaker. MashaAllah, all praises be to God for those who have been on the show visiting. I hope that you have been enjoying them. Brother Talib Kiam, my dear brother Jabril, Brandon Whiting, um, and Naima Mustafa. We've had some sisters actually presenting. We'll have more giving presentations here. But while I was away, prior to the week before Juneteenth, I had an opportunity to enjoy an experience um, in a place called Edgar, Louisiana. I had the opportunity, my wife and I had the opportunity to visit the Whitney Plantation. The Whitney Plantation. And if you haven't heard of the Whitney Plantation, I strongly suggest that you Google it. Make plans to take your family there to visit this remarkably historical slave plantation that still has most of the artifacts on that property. It's about 40 acres, still intact. It's an amazing attraction to see and to learn of the narrated history of those enslaved people that was on that property. That slave plantation actually began in 1803, and they say that the last of the descendants of the Whitney Plantation recently left that plantation in 1975. It's a remarkable sight to see. They have two of the original cabins, slave quarters that are still there. Many things to see, just many things to consider. But what struck me about that experience, brothers and sisters, was that it just made me reflect on our ancestors and what they had to endure enough to overcome. And I thought it was befitting, and a befitting experience for me prior to the Juneteenth weekend coming up, and just really reflecting, pondering, giving thought to how far we've come as a people. It's been a very trying situation, but nevertheless, it just made me reflect on the concept of the garden. The garden. When we talking about people, or this concept of garden, I can relate it or equate it to a verse in the Quran where even God has said that in the verse of the Quran that we are like plants. He says, Wallahu, and Allah, God, Wallahu ambatakum min al-ardi nabatta. Wallahu ambatakum min al-ardi nabatta. Now, you may have heard me quote this ayat of this verse of the Quran before, because it's like the central foundation of the theme that we have here. But it translates, and Allah, God, has produced you growing from the earth like a plant. God has produced you growing from the earth like a plant. And then he says, ثُمَّ يُعِيدُكُمْ فِيهَا وَنُخْرِجُكُمْ إِخْرَاجًا. And it translates, and in the end, meaning that at the end of all life, human life existing as we know it, he will return you into the earth. Now we know this to be true because when your life expires from this reality of life, we have to put you in the ground. So God is saying that in the end, you will return back to the earth, right? And وَنُخْرِجُكُمْ إِخْرَاجًا, he will raise you again and bring you out of the earth for the day of resurrection. A couple of things I want to point out. I want to point out the language and the logic that we're talking about here in these two verses. This is just two verses. This is from Surah, chapter 71 of the Quran. If you got access to a Quran, which you all do, you have the internet. So go to pull up Quran, pull up chapter 71, which chapter 71 is titled Noah, like the prophet Noah that's mentioned in the Bible. In Arabic, it's Nuh. It's Nuh. But never chapter 71 is titled Noah. And in verses 17 and 18 is what God says, that he produced you from the earth growing like a plant. Now, a plant doesn't grow on its own. A plant has to develop, has to be first cultivated in the earth. And we all know that every plant begins or originates as a seed. So the seed has to be placed in the earth. In the earth. And when we say in the earth, we mean in the dirt, right? That's the beginning, the initial beginning of any seed. It begins in the dirt. And from the dirt, it has to come in contact with the physical earth and some complementary properties, namely water, to activate the stabilization system of the seed, which is the roots. It's the part you don't see. We don't see this part. But after the root, when the seed germinates, meaning when it splits, the seed splits in half, unbeknownst to us in the earth, one part of it digs down and anchors itself and braces for what's about to come. So when one part of the seed split and anchors down, it starts to attach itself to the ground that it's planted in, and then the second half of it sprouts up, and that's the part that we begin to visibly see and say, okay, there's a plant there. There's something coming up there. But nevertheless, it begins in the dirt. And God says in the second verse, in verse 18, and in the end, he will return you back into the earth. Meaning that when this life is over, when this physical body of yours has lived out its purpose, we have to return it into the earth. And then it stays in the earth until for a time to come where God will raise up everything and everybody. See, one of the interesting things about it in Islam is that we don't believe that when you die or you leave this earth, all right, when you leave this reality, this plane of reality, right? When you leave this reality, we don't believe in Islam that a person is going to heaven and hell. Heaven and hell, as it is mentioned in Arabic, or Jahannam and Jannah. Jannah is heaven, Jahannam is hellfire, right? Nobody is being judged yet, because God tells us that there's a day when everyone will be judged all together. Everybody will be raised up together and judged. So we believe that when we expire from this life and we go into the earth, our spirit goes into this partition. Okay, a partition is a partition. I should have had my board so I can write it on board. But the word for partition is barzakh, Barazakh. Barzakh. It's like a partition, and the partition is said to be the soul is in between this life and the future life. The soul is in the partition, and it's just there until God calls the soul to be raised up and be judged. So Judgment Day is a day that we believe in Islam happens all at one time. So we don't say because a person who passed away yesterday, last year, 20 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, that they are in heaven and hell. We don't know. The judgment is going to be on a day where everybody will be judged, whether you are wrapped up and put into the earth or if you're standing up walking on it. On the day of judgment, it says when the trumpet is called that everybody will assume their position and await their trial to see where they fared in this life. So nevertheless, I just want to paint a picture for us to understand this connection between the plant as it's placed in the ground, symbolic of a garden, and how the human mind is placed in a garden and given the cultivation, the properties, the freedom to cultivate, to be cultivated intellectually. You know, when we talk about freedom, freedom is another elusive term, because when I went to the farm, the plantation, the Whitney Plantation in Edgar, Louisiana, not only was I felt so many different emotions. Of course, I was extremely sad for the condition that enslaved people had to deal with, and looking at the slave quarters, looking at the utensils, the work tools, and the things that they had to use on a daily basis to sustain, to sustain their existence. It was a struggle. So it was a range of emotions that I experienced. Some were sadness, some was anger, but I also felt I began to see the positive side. I started to see the optimism in how brilliantly intelligent enslaved people were, to be able to express some type of resilience under those conditions, to still be able to manage their life. And it made me become, I started feeling grateful for, the little few trials and tribulations that I've been through, and the people that I know have been through. It made me appreciate where this level of strength comes from. And our conditions we don't compare in the least to the situation that our foreparents and ancestors were subjected to. Far most worse in extreme conditions that they had to deal with, compared to what we're dealing with today, is very minor, very minor. So my message, what I wanted to convey to you, and I always want to try to convey a message to you, and I pray that I'm able to do this in a way that motivates you, inspires you, and in a way where it forces you to push your intelligence past the limits that it's been given, meaning travel beyond and outside the boundaries of which your intellect has been falsely given to function within. Because we don't begin to solve the problems in the garden of our community until we realize the freedom of our intellect. Freedom of the intellect. Freedom of the intellect is the real freedom. It's never been breaking chains, physical chains of bondage that frees any people. It's always been their willingness to travel beyond the scope of travel beyond the boundaries from which have controlled or corralled, caged the intellect. Now, I want to read from something from you, from a quote from Imam Wadathuddin Muhammad, who is one of the foremost one of the foremost scholars of Islam, but uniquely he was an indigenous born Imam in this country. He was the son of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. May Allah, God, be pleased with the work of his father, and may Allah, God, be pleased with the work of Imam W. Muhammad, who is responsible for transitioning us in the most delicate and I would say in the most delicate and sophisticated methods to bring us out of the Nation of Islam into Islam proper, which Islam proper was just us having a clear understanding of the universal concept of what Islam means, what the Quran means, and the life of the Prophet Muhammad, but also how does that connect or how does that relate to the reality that we have been born into here in the United States of America. So Imam Muhammad was one of the foremost leaders um, in a class of his own when it came to bringing us out of the nation of Islam, transitioning us from a nationalistic point of view into a universal point of view that proved to be very significant in our cultivation and our elevation as Muslim Americans. So he says in his book, the topic is education is a sacred matter. He says life is growing. Well, let me start here. He says, God says in the Quran, He created you as a plant, meaning He created you to grow in steps or in phases until you reach a completion. Let me repeat that. God says in the Quran, He created you as a plant, meaning He created you to grow in steps or in phases until you reach a completion. A plant is first a seed, and then the plant is a sprout or a stem, and then the plant has branches. It branches off and it finally achieves symmetry. Even in the confusion of a plant or a tree sprouting from the earth, you look at it and you might say, that tree looks confusing because the branches are not all asymmetrical to one another. They're not all lined up evenly in proportion. They're not. But that tree is actually balanced, even though it may not look like that to the physical eye. He said that is the plant. It comes up step by step, phase by phase, until it reaches completion. Now, this is where we at, brothers and sisters, in our community, not just as individuals thinking of ourselves in the physical context, but our community to evolve step by step and then in phases. When we look at the tradition, the history of our people, our ancestors, and how they had to deal with slavery and how we had to evolve from that situation step by step and then in phases. And the phases came after freedom, fighting for specific rights, and even to this day, we still fighting for rights that are denying us certain privileges based on our ethnicity or based on some minority group that we are associated with. But nevertheless, we're still evolving. We're still evolving towards this place called completion, towards completion. So completion is a thing not to be looked at, I can't wait till we get there. It's a thing to be worked on. And although me and you may never see it, our children may never see the completion. Their children may not see the completion. The work has to continue in an effort to get there, meaning that we should never look at the work that has to be done in our communities as something that we have to complete. The responsibility given to us by God is to just put the work in a better situation than you found it. When I think about my past, and for those of you who know me, coming from the streets, coming from the gangs, coming from the gang life, coming from the drug culture of the 90s, having experienced all of those things, which is, by the way, I'm setting up the laying the foundation for my up and coming podcast. Just certain things, many things that need to be discussed in detail so that people have a better understanding, a well-rounded understanding of the reality and how we can prevent and mitigate some of these same things from repeating itself. But when I think about, where I've come from personally, evolving phase after phase and incorporating new things, new understanding, and new expectations on my life, I can see what the completion will look like, but only if I keep going. We have to be able to see what the end road will result in if we keep going. Two things that we must always remember are critical to our ability to achieve completion in the form of success. two things. That is being committed and being consistent, or committed and being constant. Commitment is something that happens here. Commitment is not something that you see. It's an external thing. You can't see that. Commitment is something here. It's like an oath that you take on the inside to just be committed to doing what? Whatever it is that contributes to the greater good of yourself and your people, right? So be committed in your heart. Because if you're not committed in your heart, you can get involved in a lot of different things and it will do nothing for you. It will do nothing for the people who's supposed to be receiving or the recipients of the work. So I say that being committed begins in your heart. What comes next is the constant and consistency is in the work and the labor, the effort, now the energy that's coming from you, the energy that is coming from you. I'll read again from a quote from Imam Muhammad, and then we'll wrap up. We'll wrap up for today. He said, life is growing upwards and growing downwards. This is the plant. Now check this out. Life is both growing upwards and downwards when it comes to the plant. Life grows downward first to support itself. The life of the plant or the seed grows downward first. Remember, I talked about the seed being planted, and then something happens while it's in the ground. It germinates, meaning it splits, and one half digs down deep in the ground while another half reaches up for the sun because it got to get some sun. It's another property. He said, plants. He said again, God says, and He has created us to grow like a plant. A plant is created to grow, but to grow in definite patterns of symmetry, downwards, upwards, and then outwards. Plants are designed to grow in definite patterns of symmetry, downwards, upwards, and then out. So if you to make the connection on how we related or how we are connected or how this symbolism or parable of a tree is connected to the human being, Imam Muhammad is going to show us. He says, upwards is self-development in the human being. Downward is support and stability. You know how we used to have this expression in the hood, are you down? Are you going to be down for the hood? Are you going to be down? The same thing. I mean, are you going to be a part of the stability? Are you going to hold me down? You know the expression, to hold me down. That means you're going to be a part of the stability. I'm going to be stable. I'm going to be a part of what's going to stabilize the community. So you too have a definite pattern of symmetry to establish downward support. But not just that. You don't stop there. You also have upward mobility to establish self-development. And this is the goal in every human being. One of the most significant signs I can give you that everybody can relate to is the fact that when a child is born, the infant baby can do nothing at first but lay on its back. That's all it can do is lay on its back and depend on somebody else to come pick it up, right? Then over time, the baby starts to learn to roll over, right? Check this baby out. Starts on its back. Then it starts to roll over. Once it starts to roll over, it pushes itself up on by its two arms and on its knees. And then that baby starts rocking. Now you got to watch this gradual progression in the baby. This is the baby teaching us something. The baby rolls over, pushes itself up, it starts rocking, and it's witnessing people around him. Hey, I don't see other people rocking on their arms and knees. So what's next for the baby? The baby eventually derives the courage to stand up. To just stand up, not walk, just stand up. Because it know it can be done. But this is a progression. This is an innate progression in the baby, desire in the baby to want to be to evolve. So it stands up, and it stands up. It doubts the fact that, hey, I can't do no more than this, only for a limited time, and then eventually the baby gains enough confidence to take a step, one step, fall down, get up, take another step, fall down, get up, take 1-2 steps, fall down, and then eventually the baby is not afraid to fall down anymore. It begins to get up. This baby is reaching or is showing, and is an expression to us. It's a sign that we were meant to grow upwardly. But even after that, after we have established ourselves downwardly, after we have evolved, established ourselves to grow upwardly, then we express ourselves in an outward manner, just like a tree. The tree down, it grows up, branches, trees, and then the tree or the plant bears fruit. It gives you something back. The tree, in its own expression, it expresses how charitable it is by nature. Same thing with the human being. Same thing with the human being. So any plant that goes outward in any degree gives a house for some living things, right? It even, not only the charity that the plant gives is some fruit that comes from it, but it provides housing for other parts of creation. It provides shade, right, for other things in the creation. It's charitable. It's giving itself. The same thing that is expected of the human being. So it is charity, Imam Muhammad said. It is giving support to something else that is living, not just to its own life. So plants are symbolic also of charity, symbolic of giving charity. God created us for growth of ourselves, but also created us for charity and for growth of our own charity. And that our charity should always be on the incline and growing. So we conclude with taking away from this public address that charity is a thing. Our development is a thing that is natural. Let's be cautious of things that interfere with the natural development of our ability to express what God has put in us. There's a lot of things out there disrupting, distracting, deceiving our natural ability to do what God has created us to do. But let us be of those who exercise intelligence and consciousness. Focus on the right now. Sometimes looking back at what we could have done, what we should have done, that can distract you enough to not even too much so much so that you don't even pay attention to what's in front of you. So my encouragement is to focus not so much on what happened that you can't change anyway, but focus on what's right in front of us. And don't become too concerned with what's out in front of you in the future. Just develop and evolve what's in front of you, particularly yourself. Be committed, be constant, and be consistent. And we pray that God answers our prayers. And our prayer is even in us just following the nature that God created us to be in. So with that being said, beautiful people, we thank God for his mercy. We thank God for his knowledge and for the examples that he has shown us through his scriptures, the books of scripture, and those prophets and messengers who were the perfect examples for us and models for us to follow, God willing. So with that, we'll conclude with dua, with a short prayer. We say, "Oh God, we cannot manage this life ourselves without you. Please make of our lives what you want it to be, what you prefer it to be. Do not allow us to act on our own accord, but bless us to act only in obedience to your will. We hear and we obey. Forgive us. We beg your forgiveness. Amin." Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you.
Thank you, Imam Tyerre. Thank you, Imam Tyerre, and thank you, Imam Tyerre. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. Like you mentioned earlier, I know you closed out, but I just want to say this very briefly. Yes, we missed you, and we missed, Masjid New Africa's presentation from last week, but alhamdulillah, you came with the fire this week. So it was well worth it. Well worth it. Alhamdulillah.
Oh, I just want to mention to those who may be on with us that we are having our Masjid New Africa Vendors Market on July the 9th. So if any local vendors, there's the flyer there. You can go to our Facebook page or you can go to our Instagram page and see this flyer. If you have some products or some things that you want to introduce to the community, please come out and be a part of our vendors. We have booths still available. We have premium vendors booths and we have standard vendors booths. The contact information is on the flyer. Of course, we'll send you a vendors app, and we'd love to have you be a part of this remarkable event coming up July the 9th. Thank you.
Alhamdulillah. All right, Imam Tyerre, thank you so very much as always. And again, we ask that you subscribe to our YouTube page and our Facebook page. And again, please go to the Facebook page for more information on our vendors market, as Imam Tyerre stated. We thank you again, Imam Tyerre. Assalamu alaikum on behalf of Masjid New Africa Center for Human Development, Imam Tyerre, and the believers here. Assalamu alaikum.